Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are opening a dossier on a man who is arguably the most paradoxical figure in the entire history of Western thought.
That's a big claim, but I think it holds up.
It really does. We're looking at a philosopher who is, for all intents and purposes, the patron saint of gloom. I mean, this is the man who argued that existence is a business that doesn't cover its costs.
Right. Not exactly a motivational speaker.
Not at all. And yet, and this is the part that hooked me immediately, he was the primary source of comfort for people like Albert Einstein, Leo Tolstoy, and Erwin Schrödinger.
It's a fascinating contradiction, isn't it? We are talking, of course, about Arthur Schopenhauer, the so-called godfather of pessimism.
Right. And usually when you hear pessimism, you think of, I don't know, a teenager in a dark room listening to sad music, or maybe a nihilist who thinks nothing matters.
Yeah, very simplistic, almost cartoonish idea of it.
But Schopenhauer is doing something much, much more rigorous and strangely much more vibrant than that. We have a massive stack of sources here today. His biography, his essays from Paranoia and Paralipomena, and of course this absolute brick of a masterpiece, The World as Will and Representation.
It is a doorstop, that one.
It really is. And the mission for this deep dive is to figure out how this guy, who was by all accounts a misanthropic curmudgeon who literally pushed his neighbor down the stairs.
We will definitely get to that.
How that guy developed a theory of the universe that is so strangely comforting that it sat on Einstein's wall.
Exactly. If we only look at the label pessimist or, the caricature of the grumpy old man, we miss the treasure. Schopenhauer is really the missing link between the cold logic of Western science, the world of Newton and Kant, and the spiritual depth of Eastern philosophy.
That's a great way to put it. He connects those two worlds.
He really does. He's the guy who connects the European Enlightenment to the Upanishads. Decades before it was cool to do so. And to understand him, we have to go deep. We have to talk about his rivalry of Hegel. We have to talk about the will. And yes, we absolutely have to talk about his obsession with poodles.
I cannot wait to get to the poodles. But I really want to get to the will, because that is the engine of his whole system. And frankly, it changes how you look at everything from gravity to your own cravings.
It's a total paradigm shift.
But let's start with the man himself, because you can't really separate Schopenhauer's philosophy from his life. He wasn't the guy sitting in an ivory tower just, speculating on logic. He was a guy with some serious family trauma and a chip on his shoulder the size of Berlin.
That is putting it mildly. To understand Arthur, you have to understand the world he was born into. It's 1788. He's born in Danzig, which is modern-day Gask. And the first thing to note, which distinguishes him from so many other startling artists or philosophers, is that this is not a rags-to-riches story. Not at all.
No, he was born with a silver spoon.
A platinum spoon. Arthur was born into the absolute 1%.
He was a trust fund baby, essentially.
He was. His father, Heinrich Floris Schopenhauer, was a patrician merchant. He was part of the Hanseatic League elite, extremely wealthy, very international, very Republican in the anti-monarchy sense.
Okay, so a powerful family.
Immensely. And his mother, Johanna Schopenhauer, was this lively, artistic socialite who would go on to be famous in her own right. But the atmosphere in the house, well, the sources describe it as heavy.
The sources mention the father, Heinrich, cast a very, very long shadow over Arthur's early life. It sounds like he was a pretty intense guy.
Heinrich was a complicated man, incredibly successful in business, but prone to severe bouts of anxiety and depression. He was described as moody, exacting, and controlling. And he had a very specific vision for Arthur.
And it wasn't philosopher.
Oh, God, no. He didn't care about Arthur's inner life. He wanted a successor. He wanted a little Heinrich. He wanted a merchant prince who could take over the international shipping business.
This leads to that famous merchant's trap story in the biography. I found this really manipulative, honestly. It's like a master class in how to guilt trip your kid.
It was a classic devil's bargain. So Arthur is a teenager, maybe around 15 or 16, and he's starting to show these signs of intellectual curiosity. He's bored by ledgers and shipping manifestos.
He wants to read books.
He wants to go to the gymnasium, which is the academic high school track in Germany, to prepare for university. He wants to read poets. He wants to study Latin and Greek. Heinrich sees this happening and he panics. He thinks, I'm losing my heir to the clouds.
Right. He's getting soft.
Exactly. So he sits Arthur down and makes him an offer.
And it's a clever offer. A really clever offer.
It's diabolical. He says, okay, Arthur, you have a choice. We can stay here in Hamburg, and you can go to that boring school with the strict teachers and learn your Latin, or R.
Here it comes.
We can go on a glamorous grand tour of Europe. We'll go to London, we'll see Paris, we'll cross the Alps, we'll stay in the best hotels. But if we go, you have to promise me that when we return, you will enter a merchant apprenticeship and never mention the university again.
That is dirty. He dangled the entire world in front of a curious kid to kill his dream. Of course, a teenager is going to pick the road trip.
How could he not? And he did. He chose the travel. And to be fair, the travel was educational, but perhaps not in the way his father intended.
What do you mean?
Well, he spent 2 years touring Europe. He saw the slums of London, which horrified him. He saw the galleys in Toulon, where prisoners were chained to benches, rowing until they died. He saw the suffering of the world firsthand. This wasn't just a vacation, it was his first exposure to the raw misery of humanity.
So it hardened his pessimistic worldview even then.
It planted the seeds. But when he came back, he had to pay the piper.
He had to sit in the counting house.
For 2 years. He sat in a merchant's office in Hamburg, stacking receipts, checking cargo lists, bored out of his mind. He called it a galley slave existence. He felt he was selling his soul. He wrote later that he spent those years grieving for his lost life.
Just watching his potential wither away.
Exactly. Under the fluorescent lights, metaphorically speaking, of the family business.
But then the story takes a very dark turn. And this is the event that ironically sets him free. It's a moment of tragedy that becomes the catalyst for his entire career.
Yes. In 1805, when Arthur is just 17, his father Heinrich falls into a canal behind their warehouse in Hamburg and drowns.
And the sources suggest this wasn't just an accidental slip on a wet dock.
It is widely believed, and was certainly believed by Arthur at the time, to be suicide. Heinrich had been spiraling mentally. He was becoming paranoid, thinking he was going bankrupt, even though he was incredibly rich.
Oh.
Arthur was devastated, but he also interpreted this through a very specific lens. He believed that he had inherited his father's darkness. He thought that mental anguish, that gloom, was in his blood.
So he sees himself as the heir to this psychological burden. But practically speaking, the death changed everything for his future.
It did. It was a tragedy, but it was also a liberation. His mother, Johanna, didn't waste much time brooding. She took her share of the money and moved to Weimar to start a new life as a literary figure.
She got out in town fast.
Immediately. And Arthur? Well, after a brief period of trying to stick to the promise he made his father, his mother eventually told him, "Don't be an idiot, follow your dream." He quit the apprenticeship. And crucially, he was left with a massive fortune.
Forget the merchant life, I'm rich.
Exactly. He invested his inheritance in government bonds. The returns gave him an annual income that was roughly double what a tenured university professor made at the time.
I think this is such a crucial detail for the listener to grasp. We often hear about philosophers who are struggling or who are dependent on patronage. Schopenhauer never had to work. He never had to please a dean or a publisher or a bishop.
That is the absolute key to his intellectual ferocity. You have to remember, most philosophers of his day, like Hegel, Fichte, Schelling, were academics. They were civil servants. They had to toe the line of the Prussian state or the Lutheran church.
He couldn't rock the boat.
They couldn't just say, God is dead, or the world is meaningless without risking their livelihood. Schopenhauer was intellectually sovereign. He could say whatever he wanted, no matter how offensive, bleak, or atheistic, because nobody could fire him. He was writing for the truth, not for tenure.
So he's free. He finally gets his education. He learns his Greek and Latin at record speed. But now we have to talk about his mother, Johanna. Because if the father gave him the money and the depression, the mother gave him the neurosis and, well, the misogyny.
It's a relationship that Freud would have had a field day with. Johanna Schopenhauer was a remarkable woman, actually. When she moved to Weimar, she reinvented herself. She became a literary celebrity.
She was a novelist.
A very successful romance novelist. Her books were bestsellers across Europe. She ran the hottest salon in town. Goethe, the most famous man in Germany, was a regular guest at her tea parties. She was optimistic, social, fun, and very modern.
And then you have Arthur.
Enter Arthur. He catches up with her in Weimar, and he is the polar opposite. He's gloomy, he's critical, he's arrogant. He walks into her parties and starts lecturing people on the misery of existence and how shallow they all are.
That must have gone over well.
Like a lead balloon. They moved in together for a while, right? Which sounds like a sitcom premise, The Pessimist and the Socialite.
I'd watch that show.
It was a disaster. It lasted only a short time before they realized they couldn't stand each other. We have letters where Johanna just unloads on him. She wrote, "You are unbearable and burdensome and very hard to live with."
Ouch.
She told him that all his intelligence was worthless because he had no grace. She said his propensity to pick holes in people overshadowed everything else. She essentially told him, "You're smart, but you're a jerk and nobody likes you."
Wow, that is brutal coming from your mom. But the tension really exploded with the famous argument over his dissertation.
The rubbish argument. This is legendary. So Arthur completes his first major philosophical work. It has this incredibly clunky academic title, On the Fourfold Root of the Principle of Sufficient Reason.
Catchy? I can see the movie poster now.
Right. He brings a copy to Johanna. Now, remember, she writes light romantic fiction. She's a pop culture icon of her day. She picks up this dense philosophical text, looks at the title, and just sneers.
She makes fun of it.
Openly mocks him. She says the fourfold root, what is this, something for apothecaries? Is it a turnip? Is it a root crop? She's just belittling his life's work.
And Arthur, being Arthur, doesn't just take it. He doesn't say, Mom, it's a metaphor.
No. He snaps back with incredible venom. He says, my work will be read long after your rubbish is rotting in the recycling bin of history.
Talk about a mic drop.
Yeah.
But the crazy thing is, he was right.
He was 100% accurate. Today, nobody reads Johanna Schopenhauer's romance novels unless they are studying Arthur's biography. But the fourfold root is standard reading in any doctoral philosophy program. He won the War of Legacy, but he lost the mother.
That exchange pretty much ended the relationship, didn't it?
It was the final nail. She eventually threw him out. She took a lover, a man named Gerstenberg, who was significantly younger than her. Arthur, who idolized his father, saw this as a betrayal of his father's memory. He viewed it as disgusting.
So he just cut her off.
Completely. He left Weimar in disgust and basically never spoke to his mother again. She lived for another 24 years, and he didn't even go to her funeral.
So let's take stock here. He's alienated his mother. His father is dead by suicide. He has no job, no wife, no kids. He is completely alone with his money and his dark thoughts.
Yeah.
This seems like the perfect laboratory for a philosophy about how the world is a miserable, lonely place.
It certainly set the emotional stage. But we have to give him credit. He didn't just wallow in his apartment. He took that isolation and channeled it into one of the most ambitious systems of thought ever built. He moved to Dresden, and between 1814 and 1818, he wrote The World as Will and Representation.
Okay, let's unpack this book. The world is will and representation. It sounds intimidating, but the core concept is actually very graspable if we take it step by step. Where do we start?
We have to start with Immanuel Kant. Schopenhauer worshipped Kant. He thought everyone else was an idiot, but Kant was a genius. He saw himself as Kant's only true heir.
So you need to get Kant to get Schopenhauer.
You need the basic Kantian distinction, Kant said. We don't see the world as it actually is. We only see phenomena.
This is the rose-colored glasses idea, right? Or maybe VR headset is a better modern analogy.
A VR headset is a perfect analogy. Kant argued that our brains are not passive mirrors reflecting reality. We have built-in software specifically, space, time, and causality.
So our brains are actively building the world we see.
Constantly. Everything we experience, the microphone in front of me, the wall over there, the flow of seconds on the clock, we only experience because our brain formats it that way. It imposes that structure.
So the real microphone, the thing that exists independently of my brain processing it, I can never know it.
Exactly. Kant called that the noumena, or the thing in itself. Ding and sitch. And for Kant, the noumena is locked away. We are trapped in our own simulation. We can never take the headset off. We can never know what reality is like outside of space and time.
And this is where Schopenhauer steps in and says, hold my beer.
He does. He says, Kant, you were right about the simulation. You were right about the headset, but you missed a back door. Schopenhauer argues there is one object in the entire universe that we experience from two different angles.
Ourselves.
Our own bodies. Think about your hand. You can look at your hand, you can see it in space, you can move it, you can measure it. In that sense, it's just an object, like a tool or a cup. That is the representation part, the outside view.
The world phenomena.
Right. But you also feel your hand. You feel it from the inside out.
I have an internal experience of it.
Precisely. You experience it from the inside. When you decide to pick up a coffee cup, you don't calculate the geometry or the firing of neurons. You feel a strive, an urge, an intent. You want the coffee. Schopenhauer calls this inner experience will. Will.
Now, we need to be really careful with this word will, because when I hear will, I think of free will. I think of making a rational choice. I will go to the gym today, or I will write this report.
And that is the biggest trap for new readers. Schopenhauer does not mean rational free will. He means the exact opposite. He means a blind, unconscious driving force. It's a hunger. It's a craving. It's the feeling of thirst before you even think the word water.
Like an impulse.
Yes. It's the impulse that makes you pull your hand away from a hot stove before you've even processed the pain. It's pre-rational. It's the engine, not the driver.
Okay, so deep down, the core of me, the thing that powers the robot, is just this desperate, blind striving.
Yes. That is the thing in itself of the human being. But here is the massive leap. This is the moment Schopenhauer goes cosmic, he says. If the inside of me is will, and my body is just a physical object made of atoms like everything else,
Then the inside of everything else must be will.
then the inside of everything else must be will, too.
Everything. Like the dog,
Right.
the tree outside, the rock.
Everything. He argues that the force that makes a crystal grow into a specific shape, the magnetic force that pulls iron, the gravity that pulls a stone to the earth, and the desire that drives a tiger to kill a gazelle, it is all the same stuff. It's all will. It's one singular, undifferentiated force.
So the universe isn't a rational clockwork machine like Newton thought.
Yeah.
And it's not a divine plan like the Christians thought. It's a monster, a blind, hungry thing.
It's a seething, boiling ocean of energy. He calls this metaphysical voluntarism. He argues that the intellect, our ability to think, do math, record this deep dive, is just a tiny flicker. It's a tool that the will evolved to help it get what it wants.
It's a servant.
We think we are in charge, we think we are the riders, but we are just the horse. The will is the rider. Or maybe better, we are the lame man riding on the shoulders of a blind giant. The giant is the will, and we're just the guide, trying to steer it away from cliffs.
That is a spooky thought. It makes gravity sound almost alive, like the rock wants to go down.
He explicitly makes that connection. He uses the analogy of a blind man feeling a cube. The blind man feels the resistance of the object. That resistance, that refusal to be pushed aside, is the object's will asserting its existence. Gravity is just the will of the earth reaching out to pull things toward its center.
Wow. Okay. So we have this picture of the universe. It's one giant, blind, hungry force called the will. And we're just little fragments of it, thinking we are individuals. This leads us directly to why he is the godfather of pessimism. Because if the universe is made of wanting, that's a huge problem.
It is a catastrophe. Because what does it mean to want? To strive. It means you lack something. You are in a state of deficiency.
I want that sandwich because I'm hungry. I want that promotion because I feel unappreciated. I want a new car because mine is old. The wanting comes from a negative state.
Right. So as long as you are willing, which is always, because you are in pain. You are suffering the pain of lack. But let's say you get the sandwich. You get the promotion. What happens then?
You feel good. You celebrate. For a bit.
For how long?
10 minutes. Maybe a day. If it's a really good sandwich, maybe 20 minutes.
Exactly. Schopenhauer says satisfaction is negative. It's not a real thing added to you. It's just the removal of the pain. It's like scratching an itch. It feels good only because the itch was annoying. But once the itch is gone, you don't stay happy.
No, you just look for the next thing. Or you just sit there and feel empty.
And that sitting there is what Schopenhauer calls the second enemy. Boredom. If you aren't suffering from wanting, you are suffering from boredom. The will has nothing to chew on, so it starts eating itself.
This is the famous pendulum analogy. I have it here in the notes. I love this.
Yes, it's one of his most powerful images. He writes, "Life swings like a pendulum backward and forward between pain and boredom."
That's it. That's the whole human condition in one sentence.
When you want something, you are in pain. When you get it, you are bored. And then you invent a new want to escape the boredom, and you are back in pain. It's an endless cycle.
That is incredibly bleak. It basically says happiness is impossible, or at least sustainable happiness is impossible.
He argues that happiness is a mirage. It's just the fleeting moment of transition when the pain stops before the boredom sets in. And because of this, he does this grim accounting. He treats life like a business balance sheet.
Life is a business that does not cover its costs.
That's the line. He argues that the quantity of suffering in the world so vastly outweighs the quantity of pleasure that non-existence would be preferable. He challenges the listener. If you want to know if pleasure or pain is stronger, compare the feelings of an animal eating another animal to the feelings of the animal being eaten.
Wow. Yeah, the pleasure of the tiger does not match the terror of the gazelle. Not even close.
Exactly. The tiger eats for 10 minutes. The gazelle loses its entire existence in agony. So the net result of the universe is suffering.
This sounds a lot like antinatalism, the idea that we shouldn't have kids. Was he an antinatalist?
Philosophically, yes. He didn't go out and pick at maternity wards, but his logic led there. He argued that if procreation was done out of pure reason instead of the blinding sexual impulse, which is the will at its most powerful, the human race would die out.
Because no rational person would choose to create more suffering.
He asks, would a truly compassionate person force the burden of existence onto someone else? He says we cold-bloodedly impose life on our children.
But wait, if life is a bad business deal, if the costs are higher than the revenue, did he advocate suicide? Because that seems like the logical conclusion to his accounting.
This is a very common misconception, and it's a really important one to clear up. People assume Schopenhauer says kill yourself, but he actually condemned suicide.
Why? If the store is losing money, why not close it down?
Because Schopenhauer looked at the motivation. He said the person who commits suicide doesn't hate life itself. They hate their life. They hate the pain. They actually want a better life. They want happiness. They're just frustrated they can't get it.
So it's an act of frustrated desire.
It's an act of will, a massive act of will. It's a tantrum of the will. You are destroying the body because you are frustrated. You can't satisfy the will. You haven't silenced the desire. You've just broken the machine.
So you can't rage quit the game. You have to beat it or transcend it.
Exactly. You have to transcend it. You have to deny the will, not destroy the body.
Okay, so we are trapped on this pendulum. The universe is a blind monster. Please tell me he offers a way out. Or is this deep dive just going to end with us staring into the abyss?
Don't worry, he does offer an escape. 2 escapes, actually. A temporary one and a more permanent one.
Let's start with the temporary one. I think we all need a break right now.
The temporary escape is art. Schopenhauer had a profound theory of aesthetics. He believed that when we truly get lost in a work of art, a painting, a tragedy, a symphony, something neurological shifts. For a moment, we stop asking, how can I use this? Or what can I get from this?
We stop striving.
We stop striving, we stop wanting, we just perceive, we become, in his words, a pure, will-less subject of cognition.
That's the phrase. He calls it a holiday from the will.
A holiday from the prison of our own desires. Think about a beautiful sunset. If you are a real estate developer, you look at it and think, I could build condos here and make millions. That is the will. That is striving. You are trapped in the business of life.
What if you're not trying to profit from it?
But if you are an artist or just a lover of beauty, you look at it and just see the colors, the form, the idea. You want nothing from it. You don't want to eat the sun or own the sky. And in that moment, the pain stops.
He had a specific love for Dutch Golden Age still lifes, right? Which I always found funny. Those paintings of lemons and dead pheasants and shiny goblets.
It seems mundane, but he loved them because they were mundane. He said these artists took insignificant objects, things that usually trigger our appetite, our will, and painted them with such objective beauty that we stop thinking about eating the fruit and just look at the form. It calms the beast inside us. It proves that we can detach from our cravings.
But painting was lower on the ladder for him. He had a whole hierarchy of art.
He did. And at the very top, above all else, was music.
Right. This is crucial for understanding his influence on culture.
He argued that other arts, sculpture, painting, poetry, they copy the ideas of nature. They copy the Platonic forms, which are themselves just objectifications of the will. They're one step removed.
They're a copy of a copy.
A copy of copy. But music is different. Music is a copy of the will itself.
What does that mean? How is music a copy of the will?
It means music bypasses the intellect. It bypasses the visual world. It speaks directly to the gut, to the emotions, to the striving. Think about a melody. It starts, it wanders, it builds tension.
That's the striving.
It hits a dissonance.
That's the pain.
And then it resolves into a chord.
And that's the satisfaction. And then it starts again.
It moves again. Music mimics the ebb and flow of desire perfectly. It's the emotional soundtrack to existence.
That makes so much sense. You can look at a painting and feel detached. But a piece of music can make you cry before you even know why. It hits you viscerally.
Exactly. He said music is the language of the engine room, of the universe. While other arts show you the movie, music shows you the projector. It's a direct line to the thing in itself.
Okay, so art gives us a holiday. It's a nice weekend break. But holidays end. What is the permanent solution? How do we stop the pendulum for good?
This is where we have to travel east. And we have to talk about how weird Schopenhauer was for his time. In the early 19th century, European philosophy was very, European. It was Christian or it was Greek. But Schopenhauer was obsessed with Indian philosophy.
He didn't just dabble, right? He didn't just read a summary.
No, he was a devotee. He had a Latin translation of the Upanishads called the Upanishad. He read a few pages of it every single night before bed, like a Bible. He called it the solace of my life and the solace of my death.
That is incredibly high praise for a German atheist in the 1800s. What did he find in these ancient Sanskrit texts that the Germans were missing?
He found confirmation. He realized that the Hindu sages had figured out his system thousands of years before them. Specifically, he latched onto the concept of Maya and Tat Tivam Asi.
Let's break those down. Start with Maya.
Maya is the illusion of the physical world. The idea that this world of separate objects and separate people is a veil, a trick of the light. Schopenhauer connected this directly to Kant's phenomena.
So our mental software, space and time, that's the illusion.
He said space and time are the veil of Maya. They are the scissors that chop the world up into little pieces. They make me think I am me and you are you. They create the illusion of individuality.
Well, that is the illusion.
Right. Because in the noumena, in the will, there is no space. There is no time. And if there is no space, there can be no separation. There is just the one, the single, unified will.
That leads to Tat Tivam Asi.
That art thou. It's the profound realization that you are the other. You are the universe. Schopenhauer argued that individuality is a joke. It's a temporary ripple in the ocean. The ripple thinks it's special, but it's just water.
So deep down, I am you. And I am the listener, and I'm the poodle we're going to talk about.
Precisely. We are all the same actor in different costumes. The will is playing hide and seek with itself. And this metaphysical realization isn't just trippy stoner talk. For Schopenhauer, it is the basis of his entire system of ethics.
This is the part of Schopenhauer I find genuinely moving. For a guy who is so grumpy in real life, his theory of morality is incredibly beautiful.
It is, and it's a direct attack on Kant. He hated the way Kant did ethics. Kant was all about rules, the categorical imperative, you do the right thing because it's your rational duty.
It's a cold, logical calculation.
Schopenhauer said that's nonsense. You don't help an old lady across the street because you solved a logic puzzle or because you want to follow a rule.
You do it because you feel something.
You feel mitleid, compassion, literally suffering with, Schopenhauer asks. How is it possible for me to feel another person's pain? It shouldn't be possible if we are separate, isolated entities. If I pinch you, I shouldn't feel it.
But we do feel it. When we see a child fall, we wince. When we see a disaster on the news, we cry.
Schopenhauer says that wince is the metaphysics breaking through. For a split second, the veil of Maya slips. You realize on a gut level that the child is you. The barrier of individuality dissolves. That is why you help. Compassion isn't a rule. It's an insight into the true nature of reality. It's the moment you realize you are hurting yourself.
And this naturally extended to animals, and this is where Schopenhauer was light years ahead of his time.
Light years. You have to remember the prevailing view in the West, coming from Descartes and the Church, was that animals were biological machines, automata. They had no souls. If a dog cried out in pain, it was just like a gear grinding in a clock.
Schopenhauer hated that view.
He called it revolting and barbarous. He said it was a stain on Western civilization. He pointed out that in the East, animals were respected. He hated how the English language uses the pronoun it for animals.
He wanted to use he or she.
Yes. He said using it treats them like objects when in fact they are subjects. They are manifestations of the will, just like us. He saw the will in them just as clearly as in humans. He writes these heartbreaking descriptions. The source mentions him looking at a baby elephant whose mother had been killed by a hunter. He saw the grief and said, "That is the same suffering I feel. That is the same will."
And he walked the walk. We have to talk about the poodles. Finally.
The poodles. Schopenhauer was never without a poodle. For his entire adult life, he usually named them Atman.
Which is the Sanskrit word for world soul.
Exactly. Or sometimes he called them Butts, which is a more common German dog name. But imagine walking in the park in Frankfurt in 1850. You see this wild-haired, terrifying philosopher who scares the local children just cooing over a poodle named World Soul.
Why poodles specifically? Was there a reason?
He thought they were incredibly intelligent, but more importantly, he felt dogs were better companions than humans. He said dogs live entirely in the present. They don't torture themselves with the past or the future. They are transparent. He said looking into a dog's eyes was a relief from the duplicity and acting of human society.
I think a lot of our listeners can relate to that. Be the person your dog thinks you are.
Schopenhauer would say, you can't be that person because you are human and therefore tortured by intellect, but you can learn from the dog.
Okay, so we have this image of this saintly poodle lover who believes all life is one. It sounds great, but we have to pivot. We have to talk about the other guy. the guy who lived down the hall from a certain seamstress.
The contradiction, the man versus the philosophy. This is the juicy stuff.
So set the scene. It's the 1820s. He's living in a boarding house in Berlin.
Right. He's young, he's arrogant, and he's incredibly sensitive to noise. He values silence above all else for his thinking. He once wrote a whole essay called On Noise, where he just complains about the cracking of whips in the street.
A man after my own heart.
And there is a seamstress named Caroline Louise Marquet. She is standing in the entryway of his apartment, chatting loudly with a friend.
And Schopenhauer comes out and asks her to leave.
She refuses. They argue. He goes back inside, comes out again. She's still there, still chatting. And then the great philosopher of compassion, the man who says, "We are all one," grabs her and physically throws her out of the entryway.
And she falls.
She falls. She claims she is permanently injured, paralyzed on one side. She sues him.
And she wins.
She wins. The court accepts that he caused her injury. They order Schopenhauer to pay her a quarterly pension for the rest of her life. He had to pay her for 20 years. It was a constant financial reminder of his failure to live up to his own ideals.
But it's his reaction to her death that really shows the disconnect. It's what he wrote on the death certificate.
Yes. When she finally died, years later, Schopenhauer received the certificate, and he wrote a note on it in Latin. Obit anus, abit onus.
Translate that for us.
The old woman dies, the burden departs.
Wow. Cold. That is ice cold.
Incredibly cold. It shows that while he understood compassion intellectually as the basis of the universe, he struggled to practice it with actual human beings. He was a misanthrope, he didn't like people, and he was deeply paranoid.
Paranoid how?
Oh, deeply. He slept with loaded pistols next to his bed. He kept a sword nearby. He hid his valuables in secret hollows in his furniture. He lived in constant fear of thieves and revolutionaries. He trusted no one. He would check the register at hotels to see who else was staying there before he checked in.
It's such a strange duality. He loves humanity in the abstract. He weeps for the baby elephant, but he hates his neighbor.
It's a common failing of intellectuals, I think, to love the idea but despise the particular. But his ego was also a massive problem. We have to talk about the Hegel rivalry. This is one of the funniest failures in academic history.
Yes. This is the mean girls of 19th century philosophy.
It really is.
Yeah.
So Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel was the absolute rock star of German philosophy at the time. He was the state philosopher. Everyone loved Hegel. His lectures were packed, hundreds of students, standing room only, people hanging from the rafters.
And he was an optimist, right?
Totally. He was explaining history as the rational march of progress, the world spirit coming to self-consciousness. It was optimistic. It was patriotic. The Prussian government loved it.
And then Schopenhauer arrives at the University of Berlin as a young lecturer. He's just written The World is Will. He thinks he is the next messiah of thought.
And he decides, out of pure spite and arrogance, to schedule his lectures at the exact same time as Hegel's.
He wanted a showdown, a philosophical cage match.
He thought, once the students hear the truth of the will, they will abandon this charlatan Hegel. He really believed the students would choose the difficult truth over the popular trend.
And what happened?
Hegel had 200 students. Schopenhauer had 5.
5. That is humiliating.
It was devastating. He taught the semester to an essentially empty room, and then he just quit academia entirely. He took his ball and went home. He spent the rest of his life hating university philosophy professors. He called them sophists who just wanted a paycheck. He called Hegel a clumsy charlatan and said his writing was presumptuously scribbled nonsense.
I mean, have you read Hegel? He's not entirely wrong about the nonsense part. Hegel is hard.
Hegel is notoriously difficult, but Schopenhauer's hatred was personal. He felt ignored, and for most of his life, he was.
That's the sad part of the story. He wrote his masterpiece in his 20s, and then nothing. Silence.
Decades of silence. The World is Will was a commercial flop. At one point, the publisher told him they were pulping the unsold copies to use as waste paper.
Imagine hearing that your life's work is being turned into scrap.
It made him bitter. He settled in Frankfurt and became this eccentric village elder figure. He lived a rigid routine. He woke up, had coffee, wrote, played the flute. He played the flute every day, usually Rossini, which is surprisingly cheerful music for a pessimist.
I find that hilarious.
And then went to the Englischer Hof for dinner every evening.
Yeah, people would come to watch him eat. Like a tourist attraction.
Towards the end of his life, yes. Because, and this is the twist, he eventually became famous.
It took a long time, though. What was the catalyst?
It took until 1851. He was in his 60s. He published a collection of essays called Parerga and Paralipomena.
Appendices and Omissions. Another great title.
Terrible title, great book. It was wittier, more accessible. It had essays on ghosts, on dueling, on women, which were terrible, we should mention, absolutely misogynistic.
Right, he viewed them as big children, probably stemming from his mother issues.
Almost certainly. But the book was a hit. And suddenly, the zeitgeist caught up with him. The 1848 revolutions had failed. European optimism was dead. People were ready for pessimism. They were ready to hear that the world wasn't getting better.
And Schopenhauer became a celebrity.
He loved it. For a guy who claimed to deny the will and seek nothingness, he really enjoyed the ego boost. He read every review. He told his friends to cut out articles about him. The Buddha of Frankfurt finally got his due.
Let's talk about that legacy, because even if he was a flawed man, the ideas exploded. Who did he influence?
The list is staggering. First, the artists. We mentioned music earlier. Richard Wagner became a total devotee. He sent Schopenhauer a copy of his opera The Ring. Schopenhauer didn't really write back. He preferred Mozart and Rossini.
Still with the Rossini.
But Wagner said Schopenhauer's philosophy was the only thing that made sense of his music. Tristan and Isolde is basically Schopenhauer set to music unending longing that can only be resolved in death.
And writers.
Tolstoy called him the greatest genius. Thomas Mann, Marcel Proust, Thomas Hardy, even Jorge Luis Borges. They all loved that dark, realistic view of human psychology. Schopenhauer was the first to really say, we are not rational creatures. And that leads us to the scientists.
This is the connection that always surprises me. Einstein.
Einstein kept a portrait of Schopenhauer in his study, right next to Faraday and Maxwell. He said Schopenhauer's writing was a continual consolation in the face of the hardships of life. I think Einstein liked the idea that the world works according to these vast, impersonal forces. It wasn't a personal God judging you. It was a magnificent, coherent system. It helped Einstein detach from the chaos of politics and focus on the laws of nature.
And Schrödinger.
Yeah.
The quantum mechanics guy.
Erwin Schrödinger, yes. He was deeply influenced by the one will idea. He used it to think about the unity of consciousness, the idea that I and the universe are not separate. That's very Schopenhauerian. In fact, Schrödinger's interest in the Upanishads came directly through Schopenhauer.
And we can't forget Freud. It seems so obvious.
Freud basically took Schopenhauer's will and renamed it the id. Think about it. An unconscious, driving sexual force that dominates our rational mind. That is pure Schopenhauer. Freud claimed he discovered it independently, but the resemblance is suspicious. Schopenhauer drew the map of the unconscious. Freud just colonized it.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the abyss, what is a takeaway? Why should a modern listener, who maybe isn't depressed, care about this 19th century curmudgeon?
I think Schopenhauer offers a very powerful antidote to the toxic positivity of our culture. We are constantly told that if we just buy the right thing, achieve the right goal, find the perfect partner, we will be permanently happy.
Manifest your best life. Good vibes only.
Exactly. And Schopenhauer says, stop, that is a lie. You will never be permanently satisfied. Suffering and dissatisfaction are features, not bugs. They're the default setting.
And that sounds depressing, but
It's
also a relief.
But it's liberating. If you accept that life is difficult and that winning is impossible, you can stop beating yourself up. You can step off the treadmill. You can lower your expectations and actually enjoy the small things. You can find solace in art. You can cultivate compassion for others because you know they are struggling just as hard as you are in this penal colony of existence.
It's a strange kind of comfort. We are all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars. Or at least looking at a nice painting of a lemon.
Precisely. His solution wasn't to change the world. He thought that the world was unfixable. His solution was to change the self, to deny the will, to find moments of peace.
I want to leave the listeners with a final image. Schopenhauer died in 1860. He was sitting on his couch. His heart just stopped. And his grave is in Frankfurt.
It's a very simple grave, a heavy slab of granite. And on it, there is no date of birth, no date of death, no epitaph, no, here lies a philosopher.
Just the name.
Arthur Schopenhauer.
As if to say, I am the will, I am inevitable, you know who I am.
Or perhaps, as he suggested in his philosophy, the individual details don't matter. The dates don't matter. The form has dissolved. He has returned to the one.
Here is a provocative thought to end on. Schopenhauer said life is like a dream we were all sharing. If that's true, then your curiosity, you listening to this right now, is just the universe trying to understand itself. Maybe the will isn't just blind hunger. Maybe it's also blind curiosity.
I like that. A little optimistic for Schopenhauer, but I like it.
He's not here to argue with me. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.